Today's video is sponsored by Atlas VPN. Facial beauty can be thought of as the key to most human interaction, and so it's no surprise how tightly hinged beauty is to social power and then therefore success in all areas of your life. From the ancient Egyptian study of beauty reflected in their monuments to the ancient Greek statues of Apollo Belvedere and Aphrodite of Melos, it is very clear to see that facial beauty was always associated with a certain aura of power. Oftentimes, the idea of beauty is associated with all things good, and if something was made to look unattractive as a statue, then it was probably more than likely meant to be evil. Even today, the most famous actors, actresses, models, and artists generally possess a high degree of facial attractiveness, so the mythological gods of ancient Greece and status symbols of today are also a representation of the beauty ideals of those times too. For the ancient Greeks, physical beauty was a representation of your mind and character. Kalos kagathos by the ancient Greeks quite literally translated to beauty good, insinuating that an attractive person must also be a good one. We still follow the trains of thoughts subconsciously very much still today. Men were considered beautiful through maximizing physical masculinity, while women's beauty standards closely followed that of Aphrodite with a more rounded face and wavy hair, feminized features, softer jaws, you get the rest. Yet artists like Madison Beer are talented, but they're also a representation of the look that most women try to emulate today. I would even go so far to say that if Madison had a softer face, much like the ancient Greeks deemed attractive back then, she would not be as famous as she is. Part of this is due to her very strong dentofacial features, which are in line with Western beauty standards, whereas the ancient Greek standards of beauty are actually far closer to Eastern standards of beauty in the modern day context, which actually prefer softer feminized features. But that's not what we're really interested in for this video today. What we actually want to talk about, what is the difference between the dentofacial structure, the skeletofacial, or the actual bony structures of an attractive face versus a not attractive one. Euclid first described the concept of the golden ratio in his book Element II. The golden ratio just describes a relationship of a larger dissection of a line being 1.618 times longer than the shorter one. This is applied to a number of facial proportions as well, among other things like plants, growth rings in trees. A lot of natural phenomena does seem to follow the golden ratio, but as I've explained in previous videos, we at Coovs don't believe in it. I personally don't believe in it when applying it to faces. The golden ratio cannot be quantifiably used to describe an accurate face because it is a very much Eurocentric concept, and as anthropometrist Leslie Farkas has found in the past, it doesn't even work very well for the Caucasian groups that it was actually initially designed for, let alone any other faces of any other groups. There are much better modern day proportions that we can use to analyze a face. But regardless, that's just the disclaimer I'm putting out for Twitter trolls out there that are going to say that, oh, he said the golden ratio, therefore this video is racist. The reason why we even mentioned the golden ratio is that this particular study, the Element II book, sought to discover how influential the side view is to the attractiveness of the frontal view under certain conditions of divine quote-unquote proportions and angles. Clearly the front view is more important to overall attractiveness, but a seminal paper by Matula and Panchers described the lateral or the side view as much more revealing of the bone structure when cephalometric x-rays are involved. In other words, there is a lot more bone structure indicators in an x-ray of the side view than for the frontal view. Since there doesn't seem to be any research on how the front influences the side, which is again the opposite of what Euclid was studying, this study just compares the bone structure of attractive versus non-attractive subjects to find out if the side influences the front. But before we dive into this study, a word from our sponsor Atlas VPN. If you're interested in getting access to some of the scientific articles that we're going to cover in just a second, which are locked behind paywalls, you really want to hear the sponsorship segment out. By now, it's safe to assume that most of you are familiar with how a VPN works, and if you're not, let me run you through that really quickly. A VPN, or a virtual private network, basically encrypts your internet connection so that you can spoof where you are in the world. I could be in Australia, but to say an online scientific publisher whose names I'm not going to name, I could be accessing their sites from a region where the paywall for the content is much cheaper, almost 50% cheaper. You can do this for Netflix as well, where again, I always use a VPN because Australian Netflix is just flat out garbage and doesn't have half the shows the US has. Right now, Atlas VPN is running a huge discount, a huge promotional, and it means you can get a 3-year subscription for just $139 a month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. $139 is about as cheap as you will ever get a decent VPN service from one of these top brands, and so if you're invested into learning about facial aesthetics for yourself, you will be reading a lot of articles that are locked behind paywalls. The savings there by changing countries via VPN will very quickly pay off for your VPN subscription. I can promise you that. I've been there, done that. And so click the link in the description below to check that out and support the brands that support us. So let's go back to Matula and Pancho's findings. Photos of 399 former orthodontic patients were taken from the doctoral thesis of a student at the University of Giessen. First, the photos were sorted into the most pleasing, and not pleasing categories by 54 dental students, and from there the photos were further filtered into attractive and non-attractive categories depending on if they got more than 44 votes for either category. The dental students then took pre-recorded lateral or side view x-rays of the patients to assess attractiveness and different cephalometric markers. Some of the subjects did not have x-rays, so they were taken out of the study. After all that, we're left with 30 attractive and 32 non-attractive subjects between the ages of 14 and 24. The study compared the profiles to how they stack up to divine proportions, again quote unquote, and these other indices. These statistical indexes are simple in terms of mean composites or summarized facial indicators, and the methodology was very rigorous in that measurements were made to the nearest 0.5 degrees and 0.5 millimeters, and each was taken twice by the same person and then averaged out. From there, we can assess for 5 variables, and the first being the Sagittal Jaw Relationship, which is basically just pointing to the alignment of the upper and lower jaw in what is commonly referred to as an occlusion. You may have heard of the term a malocclusion, and as you can guess, that's the opposite of correct occlusion, where your jaw is correctly aligned. Sagittal just refers to one of the 3 facial planes that's commonly used, and it cuts from the bottom to the top of the head. Best explain that by a picture. You may be familiar with the terms overbite and underbite. It's the type of idea here, and what we're trying to do is see the occlusion affecting attractiveness. Does having an underbite or an overbite change how attractive you are? And this is something you'll only notice from the side view, which again points to the side view being more important for attractiveness than the front view. You can see here line A to A prime shows the maxilla or the upper jaw, and line B to B prime represents the protrusion of the lower jaw. An underbite would basically show that B lines being much more forward than the A lines. The second variable was the vertical jaw relationship, which includes the mandibular plane angle, the maxillary plane angle, and the interjaw base angle. This shows us how declined the mandible is relative to the Frankfurt plane, and the same kind of idea with the other measurements, but just for the maxilla. For example, we can see that Johnny Depp has a very flat mandible as a result of an overall square jaw. As we can see in table 2, Johnny's mandibular plane angle aligns greatly with the attractive male group. The third variable used was the facial height, very self-explanatory there, and it includes one other measurement taken from the nose to the chin divided by the overall length of the face. This is the anterior or forward part of the face. The next measurement basically does the same thing, but for the back of the head where the gonian is, or the widest lateral part of the jaw. And the fourth assessment was profile convexity with and without the nose, and this was taken for both the bony part of the face and the soft tissue or the actual skin profile of the face. Convexity just means how round the facial profile is, and higher angles are generally something you don't want as they indicate a flatter facial profile, and lower ones indicate a more rounded or oval-like facial profile. Generally, human faces are more on the rounder side than completely flat like a Easter Island statue. The last variable is the lip protrusion, measured by the aesthetic E-line, a concept we've covered many times in some of our analyzing celebrity faces videos, and how far the upper lip and lower lip are from this line plays a role in attractiveness, as we're going to see in just a second. The results show comparisons between 4 groups: attractive females to non-attractive females, non-attractive females to unattractive males, attractive males to non-attractive males, and attractive females to attractive males. But since there were only 5 attractive males, that study doesn't compare the last 2 groups. This is a limitation and means that we cannot draw conclusions on what makes a male profile attractive, but for the male audience out there, we'll still try our best to give you an answer. For the sagittal jaw relationship, the mean width appraisal is the cephalometric term for the relationship of the lines of the upper and lower jaw. In men, the lower jaw is usually 1 millimeter ahead of the upper, and in women, they are usually aligned almost perfectly. Attractive females showed on average more upper jaw growth ahead of the lower jaw than in unattractive females. For the vertical jaw relationship, there were no demonstrable differences when comparing the groups. Facial height also showed no significant differences between attractive and unattractive females, as well as between unattractive males and females, but profile convexity did however show differences. Attractive females showed more hard tissue profiles, so that is considering the bony part of the face, and soft tissue profiles, that is measuring from the actual fatty soft tissue parts of the face, convexity without the nose. There were also dimorphic differences between the men and women, but for the purposes of this study, we will be trying to see the differences in attractive versus unattractive groups. For lip protrusion, attractive females have less distance from their upper and lower lip to the E-line, and this could just be because more attractive women presumably have smaller noses, so the line comes closer to the mouth, which makes the lips in turn seem bigger. Even the chin prominence can put this line further out, so we can only assume an overpronounced chin and nose are not as attractive in women, which is something we've obviously covered in the past in both our nose videos and our jaw videos individually. However, there are exceptions like Margot Robbie who have very strong dentofacial features, and they are obviously extremely attractive, yet overall just have a more masculinized facial structure, even with smaller lips. However, me personally, I would say that that's more of an outlier, and for the average woman's face, this rule does more or less apply, that having less nasal prominence and slightly less chin prominence is a feminizing trait that is to your benefit. Clearly, modern times dictate a beauty standard of protrusive lips in both the front and side profile. This actually covers both men and women, and we've covered this in the past in another video dedicated entirely to lips, but the gist of that was from Hirotara's study, women prefer fuller lips on men than men do on women, which is something you really wouldn't expect, but I guess thin lips on men are a bad thing. However, tangent aside, going back to the point of protrusive lips in dentofacial features being a defining characteristic of the attractive Western face, Madison Beer's face demonstrates this quite well, and she has a rounded soft tissue profile without the nose, aligning with the attractive female group averages, but she also has a fuller profile with more protrusive and curled lips, basically giving her the hard dentofacial features of an androgynous man and the soft tissue feminizing features of a woman. This study confirms thus this modern ideal, along with the more convex or rounded profiles being preferable in women. Through all the metrics, attractive women showed a more convex hard tissue profile as it relates to the occlusion of the jaw and the nasion itself. The study describes more rounded profiles as appearing softer and more youthful when compared to mature flat profiles. Like I spoke before, you don't want high angles in your facial convexity because it indicates a flat, Easter Island statue looking face, which is obviously a very masculinizing characteristic. Some races are more predisposed to having flatter facial convexities than others. For instance, East Asians have very little mid-face protrusion, which makes their noses and faces generally flatter than, say, Caucasians or Africans, which have more roundness in their facial convexity, which gives them the appearance of more forward facial growth, which is again a characteristic that's often seen during adolescence and puberty. And so this is why, partially, East Asians are seen as very neotenous. Even if they're fully grown, their facial features resemble that of a younger person than they really are. Through the thousands of aesthetic reports we've written at CUVS, one of the trends that I've noticed just overseeing some of them is that with East Asian faces, oftentimes the doctors are recommending more work in increasing the forward facial projection, such as getting increased work done at the nasal bridge of an East Asian patient, compared to with Caucasian or African faces where there is more work in reducing the forward facial growth to be balanced out, such as with an underbite and getting a jaw surgery to bring that jaw backwards rather than forwards with East Asian faces. Interestingly enough, while we'd assume that flatter profiles to be more masculine and thus attractive, one study by Douglas et al. Actually showed that men's attractiveness follows the trend of fuller lips, as I mentioned previously from our previous video, and more convex facial profiles. So basically, having an incredibly flat facial profile is not beneficial to either sex, which is exactly why, as I hypothesized, Most of our facial aesthetic reports are actually recommending surgeries to increase facial prominence and get a rounder looking mid-face than having a flatter one where it looks like it's sunken in. And this is particularly seen in East Asian patients because their faces have the lowest facial convexity, especially due to their flatter nose shape. This also highlights why it's important to understand the race-specific differences in these faces, just like we're doing in this video, because the challenges of an East Asian man's face is very different to that of an African woman's one. In Douglas's paper, facial profiles of 116 male models were collected from the last 65 years, and correlations between time and lip curl, lip protrusion, overall facial profiles were remarkably clear. It seems as time has gone on, the facial profile attractiveness standards of men is somewhat aligning with that of women. The initial study goes on to say that the objective measurements are not enough to explain the attractiveness of a face because things like hair color, health, skin, facial expression, culture, like we've talked about, all influence attractiveness. But as Alexander Pope said, "'Tis not a lip or eye we beauty call, but the joint force and full result of all," meaning we have to look at the whole face holistically to really appreciate beauty. And this is very much the mantra that we follow at Coos, especially when trying to analyze faces. But to tie all of this into the original question of how the side profile influences the front, well, the side profile only influences the beauty of the front of you a little. Your facial convexity could be heavily off, but this is not something that you would notice from the front of you, which is how most people actually see you. Nobody's looking at your eyes from the side. That's not how reality works. People are always looking at you dead on, so the side profile's influence on attractiveness is moderately minimal. But there are some caveats to that we can cover in a later video, but the gist of it is that the influence of the characteristics of the side profile, like your jaw alignments, are not as noticeable in the front, but the frontal profile attractiveness can be noticeable in the side, such as your eye shapes or your hair recession, those types of factors. Anyway, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and comment what you want to see us cover next. We have a lot of exciting new stuff for 2022, a lot of huge new projects for the company. We're getting a lot of new funding in, and we're actually working on some very groundbreaking things. So I'm always happy to talk about those when they come out. But for now, if you want to get your face analyzed, just like we covered in this video, then order a Coos aesthetic report. That's over at the Coos website. You get your face analyzed by a professional medical doctor. And you can always ask us questions after your report comes in and get clarification, or ask us more advice, whatever you want to do. But let us guide you into getting a more attractive face. I also recommend that you check out our sponsor for today's video, Atlas VPN, link in the description.